Okay, we're gonna try this for the fourth time. The first time I completely failed, and I want to then in the second time reflect on how I as a developer can complicate things. So we're gonna try something new, but then in shooting that video it failed because the hard drive got filled up. Classic. Now with that said, I hit a bunch of issues with Lovable, which is part of my I want to use Lovable. I want to use some patterns I know that can help make it deployable. But I also want to enjoy the experience of letting this system drive. MCPs are getting a lot of buzz. All these awesome things are getting a lot of buzz, but how do we still keep it simple? So what I'm going to show here is when I got stuck with Lovable, I had some skill and experience how we get through it that I want to share with people. And then I want to show some things about Supabase as well to help you get through some particular issues. And finally, we'll come in and just talk about how to, deal with problems that just aren't easy to fix and moving forward. So let's look at Lovable for a moment. Now, when things are not working, I'm going to give you a real example, and this whole history is just full of them. It's hard to know where to go to fix it. Like you go here, you type this isn't working, and it just says, yeah, now it's working, and it's not. So in this case, I was here, and it's showing this particular screen. Now, if you look here, and it's good, it's actually still not working. It shows content that isn't in the database, unless it is now. So let's go look at the database. And so what I said was, that's not the right data. And I went into the database, I went into the tables, table editor, and I went into here and I put test, test, test. And look it's not showing that. And so what I had to do, and it was working, now it's not, but whatever, is I had to get it to dump some stuff in the console. And in doing so, I realized it wasn't really able to read Supabase, but it wasn't dealing with the error. So we'll do it here, but I don't want to make this video about solving the problem again. But what I'll do is I'll say, well, actually, we don't even need to do that. So let's go over that. So as a developer, I have an understanding of Google Chrome. Don't use Safari. It's not horrible. It's just use Google Chrome because you're going to get more help on the internet. But if I go to Tools and Developer Resources, I can see two things here that will help me debug this and help guide it. One is the console log. And if I click this, it goes away. The busyness goes away. And I'm going to close this because I really don't need that. And if I reload this page, we see a lot of stuff going on here. And we see stuff that is not showing up in this that might help it. So here's one right here that is broken. That's probably what it's dealing with, where it's not really getting my information from the database. And I'll cover that in a moment, but basically I then check, you'll see that this moved me over to the network. So those are the two main ones to really help get through some of this. And if you click preserve log, and you don't need all this, I wish I could get rid of it. And if you click fetch XHR, you'll get into the situation where you can kind of see more of what will matter to troubleshoot. And you'll get still a lot of noise here, but I don't know the answer to that, except what you really want to see are things that are not 200s. Anything above a 200 usually represents some type of error. So at this point I could be like, okay, look, it's doing this, and then it's doing this. And when you have an error, typically, here's one up here too. When you have an error, it's typically better to focus on the first one because the first one could cause the second one. So just keep that in mind as you're trying to troubleshoot and you see a lot of things going wrong. Just take it one thing at a time, start with the first error, try to fix that. So now let's give it that information and see what happens. And I'm not gonna do this with you live because I did that in the last video and it was just boring. But you'll see, I'm gonna go here for a moment and copy something. So there's a column name here, and basically I'm going to copy that because I'm too lazy to type it, or I'm bad at spelling. In my troubleshooting, it was using the wrong table names. Now, they're going to introduce MCP in time, or they're probably already using it. And that's why I'm trying to use Lovable or Bolt, because they kind of have all this stuff in place already to help me build quickly. And so they can read that database, they can read those tables, they can understand the schema. Right now it didn't though, and above here it was having trouble too. So I'm going to give it some help, give it a reminder of what the table is, what the schema is. Schema is what we call that. Now, another thing is, because of my last video, I showed some credentials. I had to reset the credentials. And so that's a thing I have to do both in Supabase and Lovable, and that really drove it nuts as well. And part of that is just, it's really important. Now, there's some internet stuff about people leaking credentials and stuff. So when you're building things in Lovable, if you push the code to GitHub, which we're going to do in a moment, just make the repo private if you can. If all you can afford is a public repo, then that is tricky. I would say at some point you need to spend that little bit of like $5 or what, I forget the number, to have those private ones. So that's the first thing, is get into here, get into the console. So again, more tools, developer resources. Get into the console, see what's going on. Ask it to debug into the console log. So then you can give it some information. So the other day it was dumping something in here that helped me understand it didn't really know my user ID. Here it is. And then it finally dumped the current user ID in there. And I was like, oh, you're using an ID of 1, but you should be using a UUID. So it helped me to help it. And I'm not going to look over there. I'm not going to debug it live with you. But you get the point, right? Have it, work with it at the most easy point. Get it to you open to the console and the network. Give it what you see there to make sure. And they probably see it too, but you just want to help it along. All right, so the next thing is the UUID moment I just mentioned. So when you're dealing with Supabase, a lot of stuff is going to be tied to your user ID. Now, when you're in Supabase, they have a public schema and have lots of other schemas, which is cool. And these are kind of areas inside of Postgres that have tables and logic that you don't want to really mess with. But in here you have your users. And a user will have an ID. And so that ID will go back to your public schema, the only one you really care about, and link information back to that. So in this case, I have mail preferences linked to my UUID. And I can actually go look at that, which is kind of cool. So my point is this, it connects things with those. So that's an important thing. And if you're working with Lovable and it's using the number 1 as an ID, then you know it's not using the right things to connect records. So most of your tables will have, that are related to a user, will have a user ID. And on that point, another thing we get into is auth policies. So row level security, or RLS, is a way that we can say, hey, this user who's authenticated can only see these rows. And users can, and this thing will help you. Like, this AI integration is great. They have good docs. They have screenshots you can take and give it to ChatGPT. I'm just trying to, I think part of the problem, there's a middle ground between those who have never developed and those who are seasoned developers. And we're getting there. And it's knowing what questions to ask to help the tool get the job done. So this video, you're going to learn some of these questions, and they seem annoying or or too technical. So, it's a juggling act. But if you can know what questions to ask, even if that means giving screenshots of ChatGPT or Claude and then bringing it back in, just keep going back and forth. And these are the places you can look to help out. So with that said, these row level permissions are there, and let's see if we can look at this one. Let's go edit the policy. And so we can see, user can view their own meal goals. That's a nice way to read it. On public meal preferences, to public is just the schema using the auth ID of you as a user and your user ID. So we see it's connecting things together. So my point here is, at one point, this was just spitting out an ID, not a UUID, and I'm like, that's not really my user ID. What are you doing? And it realized it was just kind of faking it. And again, I don't think this is out of the box. Lovable is pretty amazing, but then I brought my own database schema in, and I kind of messed things up. So I'm trying to find the balance of just letting it do its thing, but also bringing my things in. I might even start over because my schema is not amazing. So I'm going to just find that balance in the next video, which is part 3 of the building process as I rethink things. So that is something to consider. There is the UUID pattern and what that means and how that connects the dots. And if you're not getting data back from Supabase, it could be because the UUIDs are not really being used, or they're not set right. And then you want to remember that row level permission stuff. The other thing with Supabase, and this is amazing, it's driving your authentication. So as you go into the system and you do the authentication, you can manage users here and get them going. You can't delete a user, no, you can. You go down here and delete the user. You couldn't change their password, which was kind of frustrating. Like, you could send a recovery, but whatever. So, just that's how the authentication part is there for you in Supabase. And we'll come back to something in a moment. Oh yeah, credentials. We'll come back to that in a moment. How did I even skip down there? All right, sorry. Again, simplify the problem. All right, so basically I was having trouble in Lovable. This page is a simple page. The page renders and it shows text. It doesn't get more easy than that. And that text comes from a database. So I wouldn't bother with the, when I click this, it doesn't save it question. I would bother with the, when I come here, it doesn't see it problem. And it doesn't see it because, again, you and I both know that that data in that table doesn't say anything but test, test, test. I'll even reload this. So where is it getting that, and why is it showing that? So I would stay here, keep the problem simple, just focus on fixing that moment, and then the other stuff might just work after. And if you can fix a get where the page loads, it's a lot easier than filling in a form and then fixing the submit part of it. If you can fix this, you might actually be fixing the other one too, just because if it's a permission issue, which we'll find out. I bet you it is again, but again, I had that fixed. Now, when you get really stuck, we have GitHub. So what does that mean? So we're going to show how you can kind of see what's going on. So I'm going to go to Lovable. I'm going to close this for a moment. I'm going to click on GitHub and I'm going to connect. And we connect it to this. I'm going to click on that and we have a repo. Now, what does that mean? We have this repo here that I can go to and it's private because there's a lock up here. No one can see this. This is where you're fine. If it pushes up your credentials, anonymous or whatever by accident, it's fine. Anonymous credentials are okay. Usually we have a .env, or with Supabase there's this kind of other pattern where it seems to be storing credentials in a way. I don't understand JWT as much as I wish I did, but basically we're okay in a private repo to have some things happen here. You don't want to, we'll go into more detail of other stuff later, but right here you could fix something. You could see what was its last change, right? So if I really was working along here and I'm like, you know what, it was working here, what did it do? I can see these changes. I could even take screenshots. I could even give this back. I could go fix it, and that's what we're going to do right now. We're not going to fix it. I'm going to show you how that works. So then if you really get stuck or you're really having trouble, you can just download that. Now, you can actually, let me see if I have this installed. If this is the funny moment between, you don't have to be a developer to benefit from this stuff, but it's one of the secret tools that developers have, is that they can download and work with Git. And it's not that hard. It is just a little bit less intuitive. Let me see if I can do this one moment. GitHub has a desktop app. GitHub desktop. So let's try using this tool that is friendlier to use. And I say that friendlier is relative. I do actually like the command line. So we could make a new repo, but I don't want to do that. I want to use one that exists. So how do we tell it to go get a repo that exists on GitHub? That is a good question. So let me see. I want to go here. Oh yeah, I wonder if they have this. Open in GitHub. There you go. Oh, cool. So we're going to open it there for a moment. And there we go. All right. So we're going to download it to let it do its thing. I'm going to leave it there, even though I've never done anything there before. Okay, so back to this. So we can see if we were to fix something here, it would show up there. So, and I'll fix something for the heck of it. And we'll just say, actually, they have that new feature. Let's just do it that way. Let's just say that and save it. So we might not have to do anything in to push it or publish it. I'm going to just try doing this where I say history, and then we just give it a little sense of like, let's refresh it, fetch. So we should, you think, see that. Now we don't. So let's now just say, okay, fine. Let's publish it maybe. And I don't want to publish it though. So that's interesting. Why did it not show up there? I do not know. Oh, look at that. It just took a moment. Okay. So it just took a moment. There we go. So now the thing is, wow, that's a lot of work. It must have pushed something else too. But we can see that it's just now published. So now we can go edit this as well. So now I want to not do something, but I want to show you something. So if we were to go to that code, and this is where it's going to get tricky, how do we go to that code? We know where it put it because it told us where it put it. And so how would we open this, right? So we could view like, how do I know how to get there? And this is why I'm not used to these tools, but I'm going to show you. We know it put it into my documents folder. So what I would typically do is, oh, here's show and finder. Great. So here it is on my system. See, documents, GitHub, friendly meal craft. In being a Mac, it's not, you sometimes have to get programs to help you do things the easier way. But if I go here and I go to documents, GitHub, friendly meals. Now, what is this thing? This is just a terminal. And actually, you don't even need that. I'm going to just try and reduce. So a lot of people are using cursor, and if you open up cursor in this case, so forget the terminal for a moment. If you open up cursor, you could say, hey, open project. And now let's point it to that documents, GitHub, that. And then what you can do is edit it here. Now, if I was to edit it here, now what was that button called? Process preferences. So if I go search for process, such a weird word. One of these would eventually lead into fixing that button or changing it. And obviously I don't want to do this because this isn't the goal. It's to enjoy like this thing. But if you do get really stuck, what you can do at this point is have cursor work on this and then push the results up. Or you can have Claude code work on it. So you could open up a terminal and say, you know, Claude, and have it work on it. And then when you push those changes up, they will show up there as well. And so that's something to keep in mind. And it's not easy. Like if we were just to change something just for the heck of it, right? I'm just going to change something. I'll just put some dots there, right? We've now changed something. So how do I get it back up there? I would go back to this GitHub tool and I would just say, you know, yep, testing, commit changes. And eventually, if we push it, blah, 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 push, it will now be something that Lovable sees. See how it shows it there. So you can kind of get this back and forth going with Lovable. All right, so that was a long way of saying, hey, if you get stuck, GitHub it, pull it down, and then, and it's called Git. You'll see a lot of people saying called Git or Get. It's Git. It's basically, Linus named it after, I guess, the word for stupid people. I don't know why, or something. So, anyways, so cursor, windsurf, Claude, you might have to dig a little deeper, but these tools are going to make and bridge the gap between you as a non-developer in remaining a non-developer, but doing things that sometimes you need to do when that gets stuck. And it might never happen, or it might happen. Like, I think it does happen a lot, and I think it's only going to happen less and less, though. That's the good news. All right, so the next thing is resetting creds. So sometimes your creds leak, and you have to go reset them. You have to go into project settings, database API, and just go reset them here. It's a pain, but you, let's see, read the announcements, reveal, secrets, generate new, right? So you have to reset them. I'm hoping this is the right place. Let me double check. Yeah, that's the right place. That's where I had to do it before, and it reset all of these because not this one, and this one, they're in your code when you show it on the front end. It's this one you don't want to reveal to people, which will happen when you push up code to GitHub and it's in the code and it's public. So, you know, if you do that, I don't know the best way to reset this guy. I might do it right now where I go manage Supabase and I disconnect because I'm just tired of it not knowing. And I might just make a new database and start over so Lovable can own it. So I just haven't decided yet, but that's where you would go manage these things like that and connect. So will that help? I don't know. But my point is, if you have to reset your creds, go there. But then remember, things are going to break. Supabase is going to break, and you have to reconnect it to, Lovable is going to break, and you're going to have to reconnect it. Now, again, don't get discouraged. There's a lot going on the web now, and just in day-to-day, where a lot of, people are putting people down for vibe coding, whatever. As a longtime developer, it's fun, and it's going places. And sure, we're going to make mistakes along the way, but whatever. I mean, it's just part of it. You'll always have conflict. You'll always have trolls. You'll always have people who just don't want the change. But what is that saying? Like, at first they made fun of you, then they laughed, and then they whatever. Like, the progress of acceptance is probably happening right now on Twitter. But, just take your time. Don't get discouraged. You will mess up. But learn what questions to ask as well. Build up a Google Doc. Use that doc in all your prompting so that you can slowly remember to not forget to ask about something like, hey, by the way, make sure you keep in mind row level security. Make that part of your Google Doc that becomes part of maybe your prompt every time you start prompting these things. And that would just help keep the bigger picture there for you and the AI to keep moving things along. So yeah, that's about it. The next video, I will go into the building part, but that one was a good one, but again, it crashed and failed, and I got stuck, which led to this video. But I'm going to come back the other side, I think, with some next steps that will change my approach even more as I just try to just let go and simplify, as I struggle as a developer to let go of what I expect versus what now is possible with all those. But at the same time, produce something that's deployable and it doesn't break every time we make a change in Lovable. That's another big thing. So that will be the next video. But okay, hope this helps.